And from here, we'll switch gears straight to Abuja studios, where we have sitting already Kelvin Emmanuel, an economist. My apologies, Mr. Kelvin, but we're talking law and constitution. Now, let's switch gears to the economy. All equally very important conversation. But I think the natural place we'll start from is Bukola, Kayode and I were almost debating around the inflation number. So let's start from your interpretation of that, and then we'll pick it down to the issue around what is playing out in the downstream sector of the oil and gas industry.
Geoff, good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Bukola, Kayode, good morning. Thank you so much. Good morning from Abuja. I'm a bit, torn about the inflation numbers in Nigeria. I'm beginning to feel like when the president said that he was targeting 15% inflation for 2025, what he meant was that the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics is going to align with that wish list he had. But, when you look at the base effects, you look at the rebasing period for price, 2024, because the CPI was rebased, and then for weights, for the baskets, 2023 base year, and you look at the fact that the number of items on the weighting basket was increased from 740 to about 960 items, and that energy was reclassified under housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels from 16.7% to 8.4%. Food was reclassified from 51.8% to 40.1%. You begin to understand the basis on which the MBS says that inflation rate has slowed down to 14.45%, even if the Monetary Policy Committee has refused to, adjust the monetary policy rates and align it in the inflation to interest yield curve, because the central bank says, the MPC says, focused on, inflation targeting from 27%. It doesn't make any sense. In reality, the base effect, the year-on-year comparison of inflation is actually 28%. But on paper, the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics says that the inflation rate has slowed down to 14.45%. This is not the reality of Nigerians, because the prices are still very high. The Human Development Index is low, the per capita income is low, so it doesn't, the numbers don't add up. If your central bank is saying that they don't trust your numbers and they've refused to, cut down the NPRA to align with the inflation rates, then, it just means that it's a political campaign goal of this government to reduce the inflation rate, even if it doesn't reflect in the reality of Nigerians.
It's a big statement you made there, challenging the numbers. But I think I can understand where you're coming from. But the counter-argument sometimes would be that they will allow this to be steady for a certain period of time before they begin to react to it. But let's go to the...
Geoff, there's no counter-argument like allowing it to steady before, because in 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine and the prices of fertilizer began to go up because Nigeria was importing most of its muriate of potash to blend NPK fertilizer from Russia, the price of fertilizer began to go up, the price of food began to go up. The Monetary Policy Committee then was raising interest rates by sometimes 100 basis points, 150, 200 basis points almost immediately. So there is no argument like you're going to allow it to steady for some time. When it comes to forward guidance for monetary policy around the world, for the Bank of England, for the Federal Open Market Committee in the US, for the Bank of Japan, for the People's Bank of China, there is no precedent anywhere internationally where central banks wait for 1 year to adjust the monetary policy rate to the inflation rate. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so let's move from there now. I just needed to touch base with the inflation numbers. Let's talk about what is playing out between the Dangote refinery and the regulator, the NMDPRA. In fact, names have been called, figures have been mentioned. So this is gloves out, all-out war, literally, and it's been brewing for a while. Now, the allegation by Dangote is that Ahmed Farouk and his regulating team are sabotaging the local refining by arbitrarily giving licenses to importers in collaboration with international traders. And to that extent, he's very unhappy given the investment people like them have made. And he was even said, laying an allegation, corruption allegation against Ahmed Farouk, saying his children are going to school and spending millions of dollars on school fees. So tell us exactly what is Aliko Dangote saying that we should be listening to? Because the counter-argument, I always like to bring the counter-argument, is that to stop monopoly in any shape or form, supply should be diversified, not just localized.
Job, it's an interesting counter-argument, and the reason why it's interesting is because the Petroleum Industry Act in sections 317 specifically states in 7 to 8 of that section 317 that where the domestic refiner has proven its capacity to supply the Nigerian market with the actual consumption volumes that it needs based on the empirical data provided by the mid and downstream regulator, the regulator has the legal obligation based on the PIA, right, to review the import licenses that has been given for people to bring in products into Nigeria. So, Geoff, you see, I'll approach this conversation from a very balanced perspective. So if the importers, for example, are arguing that they have a right to bring in products to, stop monopoly, for example, just for example, hypothetically, which I don't think is the case, because there are other refineries in Nigeria that are refining crude, even if most of them don't have a catalytic reforming unit to be able to reform it into premium motor spirit and other transportation fuels. If, for example, that is the argument, the question we should ask is, does the regulator, NMDPRA, do they have labs at the ports of entry based on the regulatory gazette provided from the PIA, specifying that the regulator is supposed to have a lab that takes samples of products when the vessel is approaching the ports to test for distillation level, for diesel, to test for flash points, to test for cloud points, to test for octane rating, motor and research octane number, to test for sulfur content. Because in the petroleum industry, okay, Geoff, the price is determined by the quality of the product. Do they have a lab? The results, the certificates of quality that they bandy around, if you subject it to a forensic audit, will it pass muster, or are those results forged? This is the question we have to ask ourselves, because, Geoff, there's empirical evidence, there's airtight evidence to show that what is happening today is that Togo, which is one of Nigeria's neighbor on the western flank, has a floating storage offloading vessel of 2 million metric tons or 2.6 billion liters of throughput that holds products and that blends products. And where does most of this product come from? It comes from Russia. Geoff, let me take you back so you understand, you get a perspective of this issue. In 2022, Russia attacked Ukraine, and because Russia attacked Ukraine, Russia was placed on a sanctions list, right? Russia was removed from the global SWIFT system that has about 13,000 banks in it with headquarters in Belgium, which means that Russian banks cannot open LC for their customers to be either import or export products. The G7 went further and sanctioned Russian oil and gas and placed a cap. Initially, they placed that cap at $60. Then they now moved the cap to $45, which means that officially on paper, Russia cannot sell its crude oil above $45. Now, let me tell you what Nigerian traders, in collaboration with international traders, are doing. They go to Russia, they go to ports in Primorsk, Novorossiysk, they buy crude, they buy mazout condensate, they go to Kazakhstan, they buy crude from Kazakhstan, they blend the crude oil feedstock, they refine it to naphtha. Naphtha is the first base compound you get when you start refining crude oil. They refine it to naphtha, but naphtha is not fit for consumption. Then they use C5 resins to blend it, which was what NNPC was doing at his refinery in Eleme that he claimed was working. In fact, Farouk went to that refinery, took a sample of that product in a bottle, and said that it was working. And then the same Farouk came out and put in a report that the refinery is shut down this year, after the government spent $30 billion it borrowed with Nigeria's crude oil. Now, they bring this reform it, they bring it to Lomé, they blend it with C5 resins, they bring those products into Nigeria. Those products are not tested. Now, if you test those products, you realize that the sulfur level for most of those products are over 800 parts per million for sulfur. The octane level sometimes is very low, which is the reason why Nigerians will notice that their petrol, when they burn it, it doesn't last for long. It doesn't last like it usually should last, number one. It's also the reason why they always have issues with their engines, right? So it beggars belief that you have a regulator who is not fair in his dealing, who is not complying and obeying the PIA, who is not following what the PIA says. Because in 2020, the ECOWAS came together and said they are going to agree on an harmonized sulfur level for petrol that is sold in the Economic Committee of West African States, of which Nigeria is a member. And they capped that sulfur level at 50 parts per million. If we, and I've said this over time, I've said this for over a year, Geoff, if we organize a third-party rubbing roundtable and bring the regulator together, bring an external auditor, bring all the players together, put a sample of their product, will it pass muster and will it comply with what the PIA says on the standards that are met? The only person who is obeying the PIA is Dangote. Dangote is the one who has invested, who is obeying the PIA, who has reached and crossed Nigeria's actual daily consumption volume. But the regulator has been frustrating his efforts to provide these products to Nigerians.
Mr. Emmanuel, you're making very weighty submissions about importation of crude from Russia, blending in Togo. Why should we believe you? What's the evidence that indeed this is happening? And who is involved? Is it the regulator and importers that are involved? From what you're saying, and if that is the case, is that what is playing out in the industry now, going by the tension between the regulator and Dangote?
Bukola, Nigeria is a signatory, right, to the international community. In fact, the president, because of the security situation in Nigeria, skipped the G20 meeting in South Africa, which means that when the G7 and the global community says that they are going to sanction Russia and put Russia on the sanctions list, Nigeria is supposed to comply, right? The Organization for Financial Excess Control that is based at the US Treasury tracks shadow fleets. Now, they use shadow fleets to evade tracking of products and to evade sanction. So when you have a situation where the regulator is enabling traders, and the regulator can decide to sue if he wants to sue, if he thinks that I've defamed them, they can take me to court. Yeah? They see shadow fleets bring products, they transship those products. These reformates are then blended with C5 resins. The products are brought into Nigeria and they are not tested. They are not tested because the labs where those products are tested will not pass international muster, will not pass regulatory muster. These products are not tested according to what the Petroleum Industry Act says. Nigeria follows what they call the American Society for Testing and Material Standards for its petroleum products. Now, I'm saying that if you bring all the stakeholders to a third-party rubbing roundtable and you bring external forensic auditors to audit and administer that process of testing, will the products they test that are brought into Nigeria pass regulatory muster? For sulfur, for distillation level, for octane rating, for cloud point, for flash point for diesel, will it pass international muster? Bukola, there are situations in Nigeria where we've seen the flash point specified in the PIA is 66 degrees centigrade for flash points. Flash point talks about flammability ratio. Situations in Nigeria where we've seen that flash point sold within this country for diesel is actually 21.5 degrees centigrade. Flash point talks about how easy it is for your diesel to flame and, for example, your generator or car to catch fire. Right? If we subject it to a third-party roundtable testing and you bring an international forensic auditor to manage that process, will the products they import into Nigeria pass muster? And if it doesn't pass muster, why is it not passing muster? Why is it not passing muster? We've seen documents that shows that international traders actually go and they buy crude, they buy mazout condensate in Russia, they blend it with Kazakhstan light, they transship those products to Togo, and then they bring it into Nigeria, which means that Nigeria is controlling, Togo is controlling Nigeria's energy security.
So what does the regulator stand to gain by encouraging labor? Because this is a form of, labor that should be in Nigeria to be exported outside. What does the regulator stand to gain?
Bukola, the same regulator, by the way, Farouk, the ace of NMDPRA, has not been to the Dangote refinery since it started last year. is not being there. But the same regulator was quick to jump to worry when Melek Yari lied to Nigerians that NMDPRA refineries are working. Refineries that they wasted $3 billion on and there's nothing to show for it. The same regulator jumped to worry, took a sample of the product and told the world that NMDPRA refineries were working. He didn't test it, but as soon as Dangote started last year, he was quick to say that Dangote sulfur was very high, which was untrue. Okay? The same regulator came and lied to Nigerians some weeks ago that Dangote is only producing 18 million liters of PMS. When in fact Dangote is doing 44 million liters of PMS on a daily basis.
Mr. Emmanuel,
because the product is supplied to Nigerians.
I understand
based on the fact that importers are importing so much product.
Mr. Emmanuel, if I can comment quickly, I understand the tension in the industry, but I'll ask that since the regulator is not here to defend themselves, let's at least step it down. But here's my point. Here's my point. Yes, we'll continue to do that. But here's my point. Some will say Dangote refinery is not a mecca of sorts that everybody has to visit. We've seen government officials visit from the Senate all the way down, even business leaders. But I understand the point you're trying to make. And Bukola was speaking earlier about proof, about purchase of crude from Russia, which is a major allegation. Perhaps you could share that as well. But there are those who see this as plain dirty. Pardon me, Mr. Emmanuel. Pardon me. Just a second. Let me land on the question. I get it. But I want you to also speak to this in addition to that point you're going to make. Don't worry, we're going to get your response in. There are those who see this as plain dirty. I mean, listening to what Alhaji Dangote said about the NMDPRA boss, how he may be living above his means, $5 million for his children's school fees. And we understand that even the anti-graft agencies say they've not received any petition. So if there really is a petition against him, if there's any wrongdoing, those anti-corruption agencies should be getting petitions, even from Alhaji Dangote himself, so that Nigerians can really see this for what he says it is.
Kayode, every public official fills a form at the Code of Conduct Bureau called Form 001. It's Asset Declaration Form. The Code of Conduct Tribunal knows about the Code of Form 001, which is Asset Declaration Form. If there has been an allegation by Alhaji Aliko Dangote that Farouk trained 4 of his children at Swiss boarding schools, which are the most elite private boarding schools anywhere in the world, and spent $5 million, it is the obligation of CCT, Code of Conduct Tribunal, that is managed by Code of Conduct Bureau, the FCC and ICPC to probe and ask him why what he declared in his Form 001 to the government does not align with the means he has to spend on his children's education overseas. That is not the work of Dangote. He's made an allegation and the government should take it up. On what Bukola said about importing crude from Russia, I stand by it and I'm saying it with my chest, that they bring in crude from Russia and Russia crude is under sanction and is under a price cap and it's cheating for Dangote to be paying $65 a barrel. Dangote says he's imported 100 million barrels of crude oil in 2025. That is equivalent to $6.5 billion. Outside of $6.5 billion that he used to import crude from mostly the US, he's also spent about $108 million in transportation costs, freights, insurance, and NIMASA and MPA charges to bring in those products into Nigeria. Right? Why will you have a standard for one person and then give an allowance and pass to other people? Is it fair?
All right, Mr. Emmanuel.
Is it fair?
Yeah.
The president should look into these allegations.
All right, Mr. Emmanuel, a lot of passion, a lot of allegations as well, and we hope. The only trouble I have sometimes, if I like, I'll shout to the top of my voice. I hope that the NMDPRA will come and respond. So this is an open invitation. This is not the time, and this is a culture that is really not good. In other climes, when things like this are said, allegations like this are made on television, we will see the authority or the agency come out to say, okay, he was wrong, or this is the clarity we need. So this is an extension of an invitation. Just hold on, Mr. Emmanuel. This is an extension to the NMDPRA, whoever is their spokesperson, to come on this show and debunk. These allegations have been lingering and it's getting even very disturbing. You're serving the public. You are accountable to us. It's not a court, it's a government agency. So we need you to come and answer these questions as soon as possible. Mr. Emmanuel, we're totally out of time. But if you can just 30 seconds for you to wrap up your thought. 30 seconds. I had another question, but we're totally out of time.
Geoff, The reports that NMDPRA published that Dangote produced only 18 million liters of PMS is false. Dangote is currently doing 44 million liters of PMS because what it produces, 45 billion liters throughput that he has, and 600 million liters throughput he has at every time for PMS, right, is actually different from what he supplies to the Nigerian market because Farouk has decided that he's going to give allowance to these people. In the last 17 days, he has given approvals for them to import 1.2 million metric tons of PMS. That amounts to about 1.1 billion liters of products and is valued at about $967 million. That is FX that goes out. Okay? If you take $6.5 billion from Dangote and you send it out to America to import crude oil, it affects your exchange rates. Nigeria's exchange rate has a 25% undervaluation premium. And if the government is serious about fighting inflation and strengthening the naira and improving Nigeria's per capita income, it will see that the issues that Dangote has raised about the commissions that are charged by operators and JV partners, giving the crude oil to third-party traders who then add an additional premium or commission are addressed. And those commissions are capped so that he can buy crude oil in Nigeria.
All right, Mr. Manuel, totally out of time. I think at the end of the day, what we agree is that we want Nigeria to work. And want our local refiners to work. I also don't want monopoly. So, as you said, it has to be fair to all. But I must thank you, Kelvin Emmanuel, economist, joining us from Abuja studio. Thank you so much. There are lots of questions, but that's as much we can take from you today. Thank you. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
And again, before we go on this break, NMDPRA, you need to come and answer questions about your activities, some of the allegations that have been leveled against you in terms of your practices. You're accused of not having a proper lab to test. You're accused of not being able to do your work according to the laid down procedure, the extant law of the PIA. These are heavy allegations, and if you're really accountable to Nigerians, you will come out and answer these questions. That's a responsible thing to do. So we appeal to you to come. Let's have a conversation. Let's also hear your side of the story. But we'll take a break. When we come back, we switch gears to security, and this time Kogi is in focus. Join us again.